I was so excited to get this. Like, my other previous review was for the Noble Spin Virtue, and I was really excited to get that because it was my first hand spinner. From the time I purchased the Noble Spin Virtue to when I received it, like that week plus period, I had to like review and learn. I knew more about what I wanted. And not to say that the Noble Spin Virtue wasn't necessarily what I wanted, but I wanted something that was a little slightly heavier. I wanted something that was brass. I was interested in having something that would develop a patina. I wanted something that felt a little bit more comfortable to me, and had a different kind of aesthetic. Not to say that the Noble Spin Virtue does not have a good aesthetic. I do like the aesthetic of that. But basically what I'm trying to say is that I was really excited to get this. Just looking at the website for the particular version that I got, which I will show you in a second, that is the Brass Hyperstone Light. So it's the one with the through cuts. So without further ado, this is the Hyperstone. This is their brass version, the light brass. Light referencing the fact that these ones have through cuts, which looks super awesome when you spin it. And it creates really cool warp effects depending on the light and how fast you spin it. This feels like so smooth and buttery. I mean, in all honesty, again, I have two spinners. So I am not the queen of hand spinner reviews. It's not like I have spun a million different spinners and I know what they all feel like. I only have two, but the way that this feels like what I want it to feel like. Like when you're purchasing a hand spinner and you're imagining what it's going to feel like, you're going to obviously want it to feel smooth and effortless and for it to just like glide, and that's what this does. I was super not impressed, but satisfied. And I said not impressed because so many other people have given amazing reviews for this that I was expecting it to be awesome, and it 100% is awesome. I am so happy to have had really high expectations for this, and like out of the box for it to meet my expectations, just in terms of how it feels and how it spins. Especially going from a steel hand spinner, which I previously reviewed, to this being my first brass spinner. And I don't think it's just the brass though. The bearing, I think, is of superior quality, or at least it feels like it's of superior quality just because of how smooth it feels. So when I first took this out of the box, I spun it, and it spun for about 2 minutes, which I mean, take that as you will. Some people will think that's a short spin time. For me personally, I think that's a pretty good spin time because obviously you have to break it in, and myself personally, I don't spin it and then watch and stare at it for 6 minutes. I like to spin it and I will stop and like I'll fidget with it and bring it back and forth, and then I'll give it a big flick or whatever, play with it with a different finger. I'm fidgeting. I don't really need 6 minutes of spin time. I need something that's going to feel smooth and effortless and just comfortable. And that brings me to my next topic, the shape of it. Obviously there probably is some aesthetic purposes to the shape of the Hyperstone, but I believe and imagine that a huge part of it is to do with comfort. That if you're fidgeting, you want something that feels comfortable, that you can fidget with for hours. Maybe you're in a lecture and you have to listen to a boring professor for 2 hours. You don't want to have a hand spinner and then feel fatigue after like 20 minutes. The fatigue that you would feel if you were using a hand spinner that had a straight edge, it is drastically reduced because you've got the curve here, and it's so nice to, I mean, you can turn it depending on how you prefer to spin. So like here the curvature is at the bottom, so it makes it easier to spin downwards. I don't really do that, so I can very easily just turn it over and have the spin like the curve up here, and then it becomes a lot easier to spin upwards. But even if I were to flip it around, I can still very easily spin it either way. Like I don't have to look at it and be like, oh, which side am I spinning from? Either way, it feels effortless, it feels natural. And as I previously mentioned, like my first hand spinner was made out of steel, and I do love it, but I definitely know now that I prefer brass. The weight and the density, it just feels different. But they've got some additional added weight at the ends here to help with the inertia when it's spinning, and it really does, like, even when I do just like the most gentle spin, it just keeps going. Feels like you're getting what you paid for. The price point for this, I believe, is 90 USD, and I feel it's worth it for the person who is into actually like collecting a hand spinner, not just for fidgeting, but they want something a little bit better quality that has has artistic value to it, something that you know was designed with with a purpose in mind, as opposed to just trying to like make a dollar. So for a person who is looking to get a real quality spinner for $90 USD, I think it's an awesome price. So if you open up the bearing, the screws come off very easily, super smooth. Got this button, and let me take out this. It's hard to do when I'm staring at a screen, as opposed to, why don't I just stare at my hands like a normal human being? There we go. It's a ceramic hybrid bearing. I believe that there is oil in it. I believe that like there's lubricant. I think that's why it feels so smooth, and I'm not mad at it. The other hand spinner that I have, following the instructions of the makers, I dried it out a little bit. I tried to get rid of some of the oil, and it created a slightly more gritty feel to it. The grit feeling is not super significant, but I do prefer the feeling of something that is lubricated, so it feels better. I enjoy the fact that there is some oil in the bearing, and it makes everything feel buttery smooth, as I've mentioned before. So now that I just twisted this back on, I twisted it as tight as I can. I have noticed that there will occasionally be an issue with the spin, depending on how I'm holding it. I think that has to do with the fact that, like, if you look close here, let me see if I can adjust the focus manually. So if you look closely, like, you have the button here, and then you've got the button, let me show you from a different angle, on the top here. It's kind of hard to see, but there's like a fraction of space here. Like there's a little bit of clearance here, and there's less of that clearance on the other side. And I feel that sometimes when I spin it, the button is actually touching the bottom of the body, and it's affecting the spin time. So I'm going to see if I can like recreate this occurrence, because it's happened to me a couple of times. And what I'll usually do is I'll just move it around, or I'll make sure that it's on as tight as it possibly can be, but it will I have to shake it for it to kind of resolve itself, which is weird. I don't know if it's mine in particular, or if anyone else has experienced it, or if it is an actual issue with the design of the spinner. I'm not sure. So I'm just going to interject quickly here and show you some footage that I filmed at a later time. Basically, what you're seeing here is you can see some scratches from where the button was grinding against the body of the spinner. So I spoke with someone that works with spinner.vn, and they suggested that I adjust the set screw, which I did. I loosened the set screw and adjusted the buttons so that one of the buttons was no longer grinding against the body. However, when I loosen the set screw too much, I find that the buttons don't stay in place as well, so they are constantly shifting and will end up in that same position where it's grinding against the body. And if I tighten it too much in the exact position that I want, it drastically reduces the spin time. It's like very tight on the button and bearing, and it like clenches it, and it just won't spin properly. So that's a bit of an issue, but what I can say in conclusion is that I do really like the Hyperstone. I still feel the same way about the smoothness of the spin, and how the curvature is made to make you feel comfortable, and I love the look, the aesthetic of it. It's just that button issue with the set screw that I do have a little bit of a problem with, but I'm not quite sure if it's a make or break issue. Let me know if you want me to do a follow-up review. Thanks for watching, and subscribe.